I'm really interested in the ways in which fashion exists beyond a runway show, beyond the fashion world. In many ways, fashion has always been a highly guarded industry, and let's be honest, snobby. Before the 2000s, only people in fashion could be in fashion. However, when actors or singers started appearing in the front row of runway shows or on top of magazine covers like Vogue, these two worlds began to collide: fashion and entertainment. I'm not even going to touch on the idea of influencers in today's episode, but instead, I want to focus on a time before that. Let's go back in time to the 80s and the 90s.
After 6 years of working every day on couture.
My first fashion show, I went on the stage and the skirt fell off, so...
I don't think many people would want me to be queen. Actually, when I say many people, I mean the establishment that I'm married into.
I'm Halston.
My name is Halston.
The most successful single individual in the history of American fashion.
It's crazy thinking that this wasn't always the case, but back in the day, people didn't understand that fashion was deeply connected to the entertainment industry. Now, I can hear people yelling in the comments, what about the Kelly bag? Wasn't that named after the 50s actress Grace Kelly?
Why don't you own a place like this?
Palaces are for royalty. We're just common people with a bank account.
That sounds more like your mother than you.
There's not much difference between us. A few years and some grammar.
And jewelry, you never wear any.
I don't like cold things touching my skin.
Why don't you invent some hot diamonds?
I'd rather spend my money on more tangible excitement.
Tell me, what do you get a thrill out of most?
I'm still looking for that one.
Yes, absolutely. But people saw film as a different art form than fashion, as opposed to fashion being a part of film. An example to illustrate my point: Vogue. As much as I dislike the institution of Vogue, one of the reasons being I think that they don't push the envelope in any way, shape, or form, and so many other publications do it much better, they are still regarded as highly important in the fashion industry, which is why they are an interesting case study to examine. Look at Vogue covers from the 70s and 80s. Most of the cover girls were in the fashion industry. Renee Simonson, a Dutch supermodel; Naomi Campbell, an American supermodel; Estelle Lefebvre, sorry, I'm butchering these names, a French supermodel. And you get the idea. Very rarely would you see a musical star or an actress on the cover. Aside from, of course, Brooke Shields, who graced the US Vogue cover 13 times in the decade of the 80s. Crazy. I mean, she's undeniably gorgeous. Hashtag girl crush. But these girls, like Brooke Shields, were few and very, very far between. The kind of girl who could transcend their industry. Most of the time, Vogue put models on their cover. By contrast, today, the cover girls are primarily in the entertainment sphere and not in fashion. In 2021, we had Adele, Lorde, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Selena Gomez. If you still don't believe me, take a look at old premiere parties back in the 90s. It looked like the actors just went to the mall and bought a dress off the rack. It wasn't emphasized because the point of a movie premiere wasn't to show off how stylish you were, but to show off the movie. Mind blown. And that made sense for the time. As an actor, your job is to embody the persona of another person. Your own personality doesn't really matter. Sometimes I like to say that the best actors are the most boring people in real life. Fashion, on the other hand, is inherently an expression of who someone is. It conveys personality in a visual manner. And for those two worlds to mesh, it took a shift in what magazines were printing. Before the ubiquitous use of the internet, magazines were tastemakers. They were very important in depicting what was in style and what was considered desirable. Before the 90s, Vogue printed article after article about people who worked in the fashion industry, models. Everything was very fashion-centric, with very little crossover into film or music. Yeah, they were total snobs. If you were interested in the music world or the film world, you wouldn't read Vogue. You would read Rolling Stone or the tabloids to get news on celebrities. And if you were into capital F fashion, you would read Vogue. Each thing was very much in its own little box. Just as important as the Vogues in the world of shaping culture and having the clash of entertainment and fashion were gossip magazines. I think gossip magazines were a huge catalyst in meshing together the world of fashion and entertainment. Star Magazine or People's Magazine would report on anyone, basically. Anyone, as long as they could get people to buy their magazines off the rack. These gossip magazines were not just printing salacious stories about celebrities, but were increasingly focused on what celebrities wore on the day-to-day. So suddenly, people weren't just looking at what J-Lo wore in the wedding planner. They were looking at what she wore on the day-to-day as J-Lo. Suddenly, celebrities had to develop a sort of visual identity outside of their career, a visual identity for the everyday. Being a celebrity today, in whatever sector it may be, it is a requirement to think about the fashion piece of your story. And the fashion industry, in a way, now also caters to the celebrity. You're listening to Dressher, the podcast about luxury fashion and the forces that influence it. Some of the most famous fashion districts in the world include the Garment District in New York City, which maybe one day I'll do a whole dedicated episode to, and a single road in central London called Savile Row, of which I want to discuss today. The street itself isn't very special. It's a paved road, and then it leads onto a bit of brick road with storefronts dotting either side. Nice, but what gives? It's not on any Londoner's travel guides, top 10 things to do in London. It's probably not even on anyone's periphery, except that is if you're into fashion. Along this road are some of the finest suit makers in the entire world. Now, Savile Row has changed since its inception in the 1730s. It was conceived as part of the Burlington Estate, which basically meant some really rich family owned the road. The next iteration changed the road into a public residential street for ordinary folks. At this time, the street was getting settled, and a lot of suit makers were actually setting up shop, which leads us to modern day. Today, it holds a long-standing tradition of being the place to shop for expensive and well-tailored suits. To me, this is what I would consider luxury. These suit shops don't have multi-billion-dollar brands. Instead, their focus is on the craft. Every suit is constructed by hand, made to measure, and of the finest materials. Price? Not as much as you would think, especially if you're a woman listening. We all groan at how expensive women's wear can be and paying that pink tax. A suit will range mostly around the $2,500 to £3,000 mark. Just to do some name dropping here, Savile Row has had clients like Daniel Craig, Tom Ford, Winston Churchill, and my favorite, James May. The Olsen twins have a luxury fashion brand called The Row, named after Savile Row. Now, in part one, I discussed the idea of celebrity fashion brands. I think one of the key distinguishers between The Row and other celebrity fashion brands is that the buyers of celebrity fashion brands tend to buy clothes because they like that particular celebrity. For example, R.E.M. Beauty is made by Ariana Grande. I work in the cosmetic industry, and I can tell you with good certainty their products suck. Trust me on that one. But people buy R.E.M. because they love Ariana. The people who buy from the Olsen twins buy because they genuinely like the clothes. They probably don't even associate the brand with the celebrity as much anymore. I wanted to wait until part 2 to talk about their brand because I wanted to illustrate how far removed the Row is from the Olsen twins. The Olsen twins are one thing and the Row is another. Maybe you've heard of the Row and not the Olsen twins, or maybe you heard of the Olsen twins but not the Row, or maybe you were like me and heard of both but never really put 2 and 2 together. In the Row's fashion campaigns, on the Row's Instagram, on their website, there isn't any obvious mention of them. They're not trying to hide the fact that they own the brand, but they also aren't promoting the fact. Compare that to Fenty Beauty or Skims. Rihanna is all over Fenty Beauty, and the Kardashian bunch are all over Skims. And in terms of a business perspective, it makes sense. But what about from the perspective of just genuinely wanting to make good products? I think at the beginning, the Olsen twins' motivation for starting the Row was pure and true. That is, until money got in the way. I mentioned Fenty Beauty and Skims. They both follow trends. Fenty Beauty does it with what colors are in season, Skims following the athleisure trend, for example. However, the Row is not a trend-based brand, which can seem counterintuitive in the fashion world. Fashion is inherently about exploring the future. Even though fashion is a cycle, it also emphasizes having something new each season to keep people interested. I want to explore how the Row stays relevant without following trends, and maybe also how they fall out of relevance because of that. Sometimes I will get irrationally angry at fashion brands who sell simple clothes, but sell them for thousands of dollars. Like, why does a simple t-shirt cost $300? But then you touch the t-shirt, and then you look at the stitching, and then you feel the fabric, and you can't help but want it. Although $300 seems a bit steep. I personally would not do it, but that's just me, because many other people would. Maybe the better question to ask is, why can't regular people have access to good fashion? But the appeal of luxury fashion is that they aren't open to everyone. At least that's what they try to portray. They want to control who has access to their goods, and the Row is no exception. The Row has a keen awareness of who their customer is and who should be shopping at their store. The Row's start came when Ashley Olsen was in search for the perfect white t-shirt.
The Row started as kind of a little side project for Mary Kate and I, and it started with a t-shirt, and it was the concept of a very well-draped t-shirt with the best fabric that you could wear back to your other kind of designer brands. And we really felt at the time there was really no other brand that was going after sort of the core wearable part of a wardrobe, which was mainly filled with designer clothes.
She wanted to create the perfect white t-shirt for women of all ages. A common fit that was timeless. I bet you she didn't test it on women of all sizes, though. I truly detest the idea in fashion of one size fits all. It's simply not fucking true. Of course, the famous brand to do this, and who still does this, is Brandy Melville. Their one size fits all is for rich, skinny, teenage white girls. What is it about this specific demographic that everyone seems to want to target their brand to? I don't get it. Actually, I do get it from a monetary point of view because they be dropping money like there's no tomorrow. Anyway, I think people who don't have the model body type have to work harder to put an outfit together. So instead of rich teenage white girls, the Olsen sisters went for rich, skinny, white women as their core demographic. Wow, I've never seen a luxury brand do that before. And so the perfect white t-shirt was born. And she decided that she wanted to become a serious fashion designer. And thus, the Row began. Not the kind of commercialized fashion line she did before. Listen to part 1 for more context. But a real one with great designs and the intention to do more than just to sell product. She wanted to target the very customer who would scoff at buying from a celebrity fashion line, that picky, well-informed customer who knows exactly what she wants. To someone who doesn't really care about fashion, you might be like, what the fuck? It's a white t-shirt. I hear ya. But we're talking about a very privileged target customer who has buckets of money. The perfect white t-shirt drapes on your body, well, perfectly. Not too loose, not too tight. The fabric feels impeccable. For me, I would choose 100% cotton, and not having your bra show through is a complete must. The neckline has to be perfect, probably crew neck. If all of this sounds nice to you, I just described to you my basic white t-shirt that I bought from Costco. But I also described the $320 Welsler cotton jersey t-shirt by The Row. Is luxury fashion a little bit bullshit? Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, that's what makes it so potent. The Row and brands like it cater to people who can drop $300 on a basic white tee because that white t-shirt is just an infinitesimal amount better than the high street version. And the devil is always in the details. Despite the genesis of The Row starting with the perfect white tee, I don't think their white tee is where they really impress their target customer. Minimalism has always been a key trend that goes in and out of style. In fashion, in architecture, and in graphic design, you can see where it dips in and out. Let me give you an example involving interiors, and I'm going to get to The Row in a minute. I currently live in Los Angeles, and when I was looking for a new place to live, a lot of the places in my budget were old, and rickety-ass old. And the thing that stood out the most to me when touring around these old-ass buildings were the colors in the kitchens and in the bathrooms. The tiling was bright pink, bright green, with garish designs, crazy wallpaper prints that clashed with the tiling. The reason for the extravaganza was that minimalism was not popular in the 30s and the 40s when these buildings were being built. It's not just the architecture, but additionally, if you look at furniture from that era, it's mainly in the Art Deco style. In the 1930s was a time of economic hardship, and simultaneously mass production of goods was just ramping up and becoming a thing. How people defined luxury at that time was more. So that's why the styles were very flamboyant and in your face and intricate. Compare that to the tastes of today. Mass production of virtually any type of good has been perfected, and the result is that we have an influx of cheap items. It's not a bad thing at all, but it can be too much when you're buying a product just to buy it. I think what luxury does is it gives consumers a reason to buy their products. Buying with a reason. Selling products that have a purpose. And so you can buy into that purpose or the story these luxury brands are trying to sell you on, or you can just chop it up to marketing. Basically, the whole point I'm trying to make, diving into this tangent, is that minimalism is now very much a key trend because in today's day and age, everyone has too much junk. There is so much clutter in this world. And having a clean surface with nothing on it is the ultimate luxury. Another fascinating example is with logo design. The titans of industry in the past were companies that owned a lot of stuff because I guess stuff was more rare. Physical inventory. I'm talking the Coca-Colas of the world. They own all these factories and they sell a physical good. P&G, Boeing, you get the idea. Today, the most valuable companies are tech companies, and they don't own physical stuff. Apple, Alphabet, which owns Google, Microsoft. With the shift from the physical to the digital world, logos have gone from detailed to minimalist in order to be scaled up and down with the various screens. Fashion follows a similar pattern with minimalism, going in and out of style. So keep all of that in mind, and I'm going to tie it into The Row. With the backing of their entertainment company, Dual Star, The Row launched their first collection in 2006 with just 7 looks. Of course, a basic white tee was a part of that collection. The now defunct retailer, Barney's New York, bought the entire collection. I'm going to come back to them in a second. They're integral to The Row's story. In that first collection, The Row's name wasn't even on the clothes. If you were a shopper at Barney's, you could see a white t-shirt hanging on the rack with a single French seam running down the back. On the inside back of the shirt, you could find a gold chain with no name. It's kind of a romantic idea. Let the clothes speak for themselves. Rebelling against what was trendy or popular at the time, The Row banks on the idea of minimalism. The design language The Row speaks is very discreet. Inspired by designers like Yoshi Yamamoto, The Row is all about restrained elegance. It's very modest, and it kind of makes sense. The Olsen twins were one of the most famous childhood actors of the 90s and one of the most famous teenagers in the early 2000s. As they became adults, they created a fashion brand that was everything but attention-seeking and flashy. Within that very first minimalist collection, there are a pair of sateen leggings, a tank top, a cashmere dress, a blazer, a cardigan, a sleeveless sweater. Pictures on my website. Baked into their strategy was including the best fits with the best materials, with the best tailoring, invoking their namesake's origins, Savile Row. Mary-Kate also explains that their first blazer was inspired by one of her first show jumping coats from horseback riding. Consumers really seem to like the collection, but once again, the snootiness of fashion people and the history of keeping fashion within fashion's walls come out when the Olsen twins released their first collection. Only real fashion designers should have the right to make a high-end fashion. Vera Wang said in an article published by The Cut, taking aim at the twins, she said, "Celebrities have made it harder for real fashion designers." And not gonna lie, there is a lot of validity to Vera Wang's point, but let's get into the nuance of it. Almost giving in to the critics, the Olsen twins hired real fashion designers like Danielle Sherman, and then later in 2011, Nadege van Hees-Kobolski, an alumni of Margiela and Phoebe Philo's Celine. Depending on how you want to look at the situation, is the real creative talent with the trained fashion designers like Nadege, or is the creative talent with the Olsen twins? I think trained fashion designers, the people Vera Wang was referring to in that quote, the kind of people who toil in the background, the people doing the sewing, doing the AI designs, the people who know what tech packs are, how to sew fabric, what types of fabric to use in what setting, what fabric bleeds are. The technical knowledge that some people would consider is required of a good fashion designer. I can see why it would be extremely, extremely frustrating wanting to perhaps go about and create your own fashion brand, but then get outshined by these celebrities who really don't know any of it. I would describe the Olsen twins as fashion knowledge being that of seasoned shoppers. They are able to explain using piles and piles of vintage clothing exactly what they want made or updated. With the help of their new staff, they kept it pushing, and eventually in 2010, the sisters released their first collection, debuting in New York Fashion Week. There's a 5-minute video on YouTube that presents all of these looks that the sisters designed with the help of their team. And to be honest, I was bored, and very bored. Every single look had a thong type sandal, which I remember being super popular back in the 2010s. The flow and movement was just not there. It was simple, but a very boring kind of simple, and every single look looked the same. I think the hardest part about a collection is having individual looks that can stand up on their own right, but also being cohesive within a greater collection, and to add another layer, cohesive within a single brand. Another aspect that was entirely the same were the models. You guessed it, the majority of their models were white, maybe foreshadowing a little bit about some of the problems the row encounters later on in our story. In the early 2010s, when this particular fashion show took place, this was a non-issue, but today, it's something you really got to think about. Since then, they've been known to do non-traditional runway shows, so instead of participating in Fashion Week, they'll do more intimate fashion experiences. Now, before I move ahead in our timeline, I want to talk about their business model. The row sells direct to consumer on their website, but the bulk of their business is in wholesale. One of their biggest consumers was Barney's. Marina Larude, for years, was the fashion director at Barney's New York, where she explained that the row was the #1 selling ready-to-wear brand. Full stop, let that sink in. It sold better than brands like Prada, better than Gucci. That is bananas. Now, for those who've worked in retail, you won't even blink an eyelash at this next story I'm going to share. I know your job is fucking nuts. But for those who haven't, fasten your seatbelts. There was this one customer who bought 30 the row sweaters, the exact same crew neck sweater, 30 times, effectively dropping over 30 bands in one day. Yeah, that happened at Barney's New York. Now, this person isn't just a loyal customer of the row. They are probably a top tier spender, a VIP customer. And let me tell you, luxury fashion houses really haul ass for their VIPs. And it's so interesting the lengths these luxury fashion houses will go to make their VIPs feel super special. I think it's interesting for me as someone who comes from a very, very humble background, as someone who, ain't got shit. I find these stories fascinating. And so this is what the row does for their VIPs. One of the things they do. For their biggest spenders, their most loyal customers, the Olsen sisters invite them to runway shows, effectively giving these VIP customers a sneak peek at what is to come so that they can drop $1 million on the next collection, really. It's smart. So the Olsen girls were doing well for themselves. Imagine that exact same scenario repeating again and again at the other big luxury fashion retailers they sell their clothes at, like Bergdorf's or Neiman Marcus. With big spenders like that, trust me, the Olsen sisters are laughing their way all the way to the bank. Not only were their sales good, but their designs were good too, and received a lot of high praise. Like for any other cultural industry, there are award shows for fashion. One of them is the Council of Fashion Designers of America. In 2012 and 2015, they won Women's Wear Designer of the Year. In 2014 and 2018, they won Accessory Designers of the Year. I think the first year they won in 2012.
Oh my God, I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. First, we'd like to thank the CFDA and Diane and Stephen for all of your continued support throughout the years. We'd like to thank Vogue and Anna Wintour for your support as well.
As you can hear, they seem a bit frazzled and surprised. They did beat out other designers who had been in the game for so much longer, like Joseph Altuzarra. Specifically, they beat out people who are capital F fashion designers, not celebrities. Not to downplay their success at all, but I think it's important to keep in mind that awards are kind of pointless and they don't really accurately portray all of the worker bees who helped contribute to the row's success. Where are their flowers? One of the many controversies, or depending on how you look at it, achievements of the row was in 2012 when they released 12 limited edition alligator pill printed backpacks, each costing $55,000. The design itself seemed like it was coming out of left field. I mean, colorful pills on an alligator print. Yes, you heard me right. I said colorful. We all know that the rose color palette is a schematic of grays and beige. Color doesn't compute. Totally not in line with the rose aesthetic. So how did this come to be? If you take a look at my website and look at this pill bag, you'll be unsurprised to hear that Damien Hirst designed this bag. For those unfamiliar, Damien is an English artist whose art consists of taking a picture posing next to some dude at the morgue. What? A 14-foot tiger shark preserved in formaldehyde. A human skull replica encrusted in diamonds. Like, this dude, Damien, collaborated with the Olsen twins. I'm confused. But apparently, the people who bought the bag were not. Lady Gaga was one of those 12 people. Another controversy that is a little bit more serious occurred 3 years after the alligator pill bag incident happened, when Dual Star was sued in a class action lawsuit by 40 former interns. The row apparently did not pay their interns and overworked them, which infuriates me. Why are unpaid internships even a thing? Just because someone is young and doesn't have much experience, aka they don't know better, does not mean corporations can exploit their energy. It's like an older guy who only dates younger or inexperienced women because those are the ones who will put up with this bullshit. Companies take advantage of young people's willingness to put in the work. I know the fashion industry is super competitive, and sometimes you have to be doing menial work in order to get your foot in the door. Literally the least, the bare minimum a for-profit company can do is pay you. Especially one as successful as the row. For crying out loud, the row sells tops for $3,000 and they can't afford to pay their interns minimum wage. Like, get out of here. Let me give you some color on this case. Haha. Their lead plaintiff, Shahista Lalani, said she was hospitalized for dehydration because of the job. She said, quote, "It was like 100 degrees outside. I was just sweating to death. I probably carried like 50 pounds worth of trench coats," end quote. Other than laboring in the New York City heat, her other duties consisted of inputting data into spreadsheets, making tech sheets, running personal errands for paid employees, organizing material, photocopying, sewing, pattern cutting, and etc. She and other interns would be working all day and literally up until 10 p.m. at night. On top of the sheer amount of work, there appeared to be emotional distress as well. Shahista says, quote, "They're kind of mean to you. Other interns have cried. I see a lot of kids crying during coffee runs, photocopying stuff," end quote. All of this, by the way, should I emphasize it more, is unpaid. According to the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, internships at for-profit companies can be unpaid if the internship is, quote, "for the benefit of the intern," end quote. After all of this fuckery, Dual Star responded with this statement, quote, "The allegations in the complaint file against Dual Star are groundless, and Dual Star will vigorously defend itself against plaintiffs' claims in court, not before the media. Dual Star is confident that once the true facts of this case are revealed, the lawsuit will be dismissed in its entirety," end quote. The really awful thing about this is that there are so many other court cases detailing this exact same thing. Swap out the row with Condé Nast, Atlantic Records, Warner Music, etc. What seems to be a common trend is the more glamorous the industry, film, music, fashion, the more likely the company is to treat their people horribly. In the end, the judge ruled in the interns' favor. Each unpaid employee is expected to receive a whopping, get ready for this, $530. Wow, so generous. If you multiply 530 by 40 X interns, and then divide that number by one $3,000 silk top, the final number comes out to 7. Like, all you needed to do was sell 7, maybe a little more to account for labor, bomb costs, to pay your 40 interns. Like, it's not that much money. Rich people are the least generous. Period. Counterintuitive, but it's completely true. All these controversies didn't stop the Row from growing, though. It was around this time where they began hiring executive leadership. They hired ex-Oliver's People's CEO David Schulte, I think that's how you say it, as president of the Row in 2016. And Paul Helbers, former head of menswear at Louis Vuitton, and Mason Martin Margiela. With the hiring of Helbers, they launched into the menswear category. Obviously, that's why they hired his expertise. In addition to that, they were also launching their own brick and mortar stores, one in London, one in LA, and one in New York City, where apparently there was another lawsuit of a disgruntled customer falling down the marble steps. LOL, Americans and their lawsuits. As much as minimalism played into the Row's favor in the early 2010s, I think it has also in a way led to their decline. That minimalist look really isn't special anymore. It's available everywhere at almost every single price point. And it's not even just available in fashion, it's available elsewhere as well. Let's take a look at Red Antler for a second as a case study. It's a marketing/design agency based in New York City. They've done branding for Casper Mattresses, Allbirds, and Chime. One is in the banking industry, one is a mattress company, and the other sells footwear. But I'm telling you, all of these brands look the same across the board. And I can see a similar trend across fashion brands like Cause and Weekday at the lower price points, Theory and Arquette sort of at the middle price points, Acne Studios and Totem and Celine at the luxury level. All these brands have a very similar minimalist vibe going on. When the Row first hit the scene back in 2006, there really was a scarcity in the minimalist look. People were still weaning off of the maximalist style of dressing from the early 2000s. Remember, this was the era where chandelier earrings were popular. Baby doll dresses was also a thing. That same year, The Devil Wears Prada was released, and every outfit in that movie was not in line with the minimalist aesthetic. So, brands like The Row really stood out from the rest as something different. Today, I'm not even sure if minimalism is all that popular anymore. The luxury customer is a younger person, and young people are influenced not so much by fashion magazines who would print an issue every month, but by the quick turnover of Instagram and TikTok. I talked about a white t-shirt earlier, but I don't think anyone really cares about the perfect white t-shirt anymore because it's a basic item. Today's luxury customer, people care more about quantity and having a different outfit for every Instagram picture. Nobody really wants to wear the same white t-shirt on repeat. The idea of a capsule wardrobe is dead. I did a little survey with my inner circle, and although this is not science, it's an interesting data point I'd like to point out. None of my friends had ever heard of the Row, not even my friend who worked in fashion. The only people who knew about the Row were older, wealthier women in their 40s and 50s. I think this is the case because it's in line with the older idea of fashion and how only older people have time to build up the wealth and can afford luxury fashions. So then the question is, why would only older women be the ones wearing the Row? To me, I think the reason is that stealth wealth isn't really hype anymore. With social media, life is once again very flashy. The popular music of today preaches showing off your wealth, flaunting it, and name dropping whenever you can.
Bentley tints on, Fendi prints on. I mean, I've been stormed. Feeling fussy, walking in my Balenciennes, trying to bring out the fat beard look.
Rockin' so I am, I like it, pay me. I just signed a new deal with Mercedes. Got me moving dirty like I'm Swayze.
Don't ask me the time I got spaghettis in the face. Jojo drops on Louis, I want everything he made.
And you get the idea. It's no wonder my generation is a little obsessed with luxury brands. The Row just doesn't have that flashy element to it. It's stealth wealth. You would never hear a singer of our generation saying that they were rocking the Row. That's not to say the Row isn't hugely successful. They're an uber successful company in targeting their niche audience. One thing I noticed was when you look at the Row's clothes, you might notice a similar vibe to Phoebe Philo's tenure at Celine. How Phoebe and her team were able to make clothes that literally had no seams in it boggles my mind. And interestingly enough, that same customer who gravitates to Phoebe Philo Celine is the exact same customer who gravitates to the Row. The sort of no frills, no fuss kind of customer. To put more of a demographic spin onto this conversation, the Row's customers are largely American. They really haven't gotten a good foothold in the Asian or European markets yet, which can be challenging in terms of growth. As we all know, Asia is the key. That's why you see all these tech companies clamoring to get into China, maybe even compromising their ethics of censorship in order to get to that pot of gold. Remember when Facebook was trying to get a foothold into China? They had a zero tolerance policy on censorship done by the Chinese government, but now it's not so much the case. Big tech in general is huge on censorship. I mean, they love it. The same trend is also happening in the luxury fashion space as well. I think for the Row to crack China, they would definitely have to compromise on their design ethos because the Chinese market prefers something a bit more flashy. One thing I will say though is that the Row is marketed as an all-American brand. For the longest time, they produced everything in America, particularly in the garment district of New York City. But during the midst of the pandemic, things got really rocky for them. A lot of their leadership stepped down, including co-design director James Robinson and Anna Sophia Hanover, and their president, David Schulte, who is currently in the midst of suing them and their parent company, Dualstar. Not great. Under the recent exits, Ashley has been serving as CEO and Mary-Kate as the creative director. It wasn't just upper management who left. A lot of regular employees left the company as well. If you'll think back to the pandemic, a lot of companies applied for something called a PPP government loan. The Row applied and was approved for a $2.3 million loan, which this policy was meant to inject small businesses with cash to keep their employees hired. Not for big corporations, but whatever. In my opinion, along with 2008, the pandemic was definitely one of the biggest wealth heists of the century, and certainly one that I can remember. The PPP loans were just one example. Instead of keeping their employees employed, the Row allegedly laid off over half of their staff. So while the little people were getting effed over, Mary-Kate allegedly spent $325,000 on a summer Hamptons rental to hide out during the COVID-19 lockdowns this summer. I don't understand how you could, in good conscience, spend that much money on a rental property when you already own property in New York City, just 2 hours away from the Hamptons, to hide out in the pandemic when you could have used that money to pay your employees. Those optics are terrible. On top of the internal struggles, the long-standing American luxury fashion brand moved production to Italy, where labor is cheaper. All this was at the heels of their biggest retailer, Barney's. Remember them from the beginning of this podcast? This was the time when Barney's filed for bankruptcy. Court filings revealed that the Row was owed over $3.7 million and outstanding debts from Barney's. And that's the problem with having a wholesale business model, my friends. There's a lot of reasons why businesses struggled or flourished in the pandemic. And I can sit here and blab to you about supply chain issues, about the problem of having a wholesale model. But what about the psychology behind buying habits? The rose color palette is a color wheel of beige. Let's get real. You could say it's timeless, or you could also say that it's boring. During the pandemic, people want joy. Maybe they aren't gravitated towards boring colors as much. Either way, the row really needed to find a way to pivot, and it desperately needed to inject itself with some much needed cash. One of the ways the row tried to pivot was when they launched a children's collection, still in the very simplistic aesthetic, although a bit more colorful. The collection included cashmere everything: cashmere belted robes, cashmere pants, crew necks, velvet slip-on shoes. None of the pieces were gendered, and the clothes are, as you might expect, devoid of any frills, which I guess the Olsens considered buttons and zippers frills. Yes, I'm making fun of them a little bit, but I have rather strong opinions about this collection. Sure, it's a nice idea to have clothes non-gendered and being of luxe materials, but how practical is that? Kids are disgusting, and there's no way they're treating your $520 cashmere crew neck sweater well. And from a desire standpoint, releasing a really expensive kids collection in the middle of a pandemic, I don't have a degree in PR, but I could tell you, not great. And from the kids' desire standpoint, kids want to dress like Jojo Siwa, not like Steve Jobs. Not that there are any turtlenecks in this collection, but he dresses simplistically. If you're wondering, the collection was released in fall of 2021, and it's still on sale today. The row also added fragrances to the list of product categories in 2021. Obviously, this was the same year they launched the children's line. I think when a fashion brand launches fragrances, it isn't as much work as you would think, because they partner with a company who is an expert in formulating fragrances. Instead of a traditional alcohol-based fragrance, they wanted to make fragrance oils, which I respect, I guess. They partnered with, I'm going to butcher this name, L'Oil du Vert. Despite its name, it's not French. It's based in Los Angeles. They ended up formulating 3 oils, one for each letter of the row. According to the website, R is a sensory blend of fresh tobacco leaves, sandalwood, burnt esfant? What is that? Seeds and rose, while O features notes of blue water lily, olibanum, and orris. No idea what that is. Probably pronounced it wrong too. W is a mix of amber, champa, no idea, and incense woods. The O being the most expensive one. More expensive than the others, like awkward, not sure why. And you would not believe how much they're charging. They're charging $530 for 7 milligrams. My mind is blown. I guess they really needed that cash so Mary Kate can rent expensive properties in the Hamptons. Oh my gosh, nobody is safe. I am so shady. What I will say, though, is that the row has been successful for a reason. What I think separates the row from other luxury brands is that they aren't focused on branding as much. It's more about the quality of their tailoring. However, a trend I do see happening, and that was especially accelerated through COVID, is a huge push towards loungewear. When I was in business school, they emphasize dressing for the office. Dressing. Everything from smart casual to business professional. But the push to work from home, dressing this way is just not a thing anymore. Thoreau, unfortunately, has a lot of highly structured clothing for both men and women, and I do see a lot of companies phasing out of these styles a little bit and leaning more towards loungewear. Despite their brand's DNA being connected to Savile Row, the Row could soon just be made up of really nicely cut styles of lounge. Because who wants to wear a $5,000 suit if you're just going to be at home all day? Throughout this podcast, I've been exploring the idea of luxury. What is luxury? I may have my own definition of luxury as a consumer, but this is what Mary-Kate had to say. The word luxury is used pretty much everywhere now, but for us, it's something that makes your life easier. She points out the idea that you could buy something off the rack, put it onto your body, and it already feels like a part of your wardrobe. That's luxury. You don't even have to think about it. Thank you for listening. Every episode is written and produced by me, Michelle Chang. Every episode has a companion blog post on my website, dresserpodcast.com. Find all of the books, movies, and articles I used to research this episode there. Take a look. Two-parter episodes are really fun for me to make because they really are an in-depth look at one brand. I hope you enjoyed it. It would mean so much to me if you gave this podcast a 5-star review. Those small actions by you really help me out a lot. The next episode will be the last one in season 1, and the topic is digital fashion. For everyone who has walked with me on this journey, I want to humbly thank you. Now, onto my fashion trimmings. Now, I know I've kind of spent the entire episode talking about how the Row doesn't do trends. Well, in 2011, they did the trendiest thing possible, which was a collaboration with Tom's.
One of my favorite stories to tell is about a woman who's so happy because these 3 boys, her sons, got new Tom shoes, and it was the first time in their life that they all had a new pair of shoes at the same time. And what that meant was all of her boys would go to school every day together.
LOL, new shoes means going to school? Where did you make that logical leap? Anyway, nobody cares about Toms today, but when I was in middle school, it seemed like practically every single girl had a pair. It was the trendiest thing of that era. The Row, interestingly, did a collab with them back in the day, and they were done at a higher price point than what Toms would normally sell their shoes for. The Row X Toms sold shoes for $95 to $150. Did that mean that Toms gave away a pair of shoes at a higher price point as well? Probably not. They just made more profits. There are many reasons to hate Toms. I feel like their whole business model is based on dehumanizing poor people. They try to disguise it as philanthropic capitalism, but it's just another for-profit corporation that has, well, really good marketing. Another thing that corporations like Tom's tries to market to us is the idea that poor people need clothes and that they need shoes. As if poor people of the world are running around naked. Like, that's just a completely 100% diametrically false. I mean, if you just sat and thought for 2 seconds about this issue and thought about how much clothing actually gets produced in this world. And I'm not just even talking about luxury fashion at this point. I'm talking about the whole fashion supply chain ecosystem. Take H&M, for example. It's $1 billion fashion company. They make tons, literal tons and tons of clothes to keep up with the fashions of the day. And they burn billions of dollars worth of unsold clothing. And so really the world is not in lack of clothes. It is in abundant supply. And so having a philanthropic model around giving away fashions is dumb. I feel like that's emblematic of charities nowadays. Rich people will evade taxes, not pay their interns, but they will try to dampen their guilt by doing rather meaningless charity work. What do you guys think? There's this idea I've been thinking about with regards to celebrity fashion labels, and that's if you're famous enough, you really don't need to have technical skills, how to create a tech pack, how to sew, how to use Illustrator. But because I've been researching a lot about the fashion industry, I actually don't expect celebrities to have any technical skills. I know that it's just a marketing tactic to make it seem like the Olsen sisters are these creative geniuses, the force behind the row, or that Kanye West is the sole force behind Yeezys, which I do give him props because he has taken the time to learn some of these technical skills as opposed to other celebrity fashion designers. But really, as we've seen in this episode, these celebrities hire amazing talent to do most of the technical stuff for them. And that's including the business side of fashion. They hire fabric trimmers. They hire people to negotiate with factories. They hire people to plan out the supply chain, which is a huge part of the fashion industry. Celebrities just sit at the top, delegating, reaping all of the benefits and profits. So to me, I think I've made it very clear that the real talent is with the worker bees. But do they get any award, credit, shine, or most importantly, money? Of course not. I'll give you an example. I've talked a bit about Phoebe Philo in this episode, and God, one day I'll do a whole dedicated episode to this woman. Here's how she relates to this idea I'm trying to articulate here about celebrities versus so-called actual designers. She was the woman who basically resurrected the dead French brand Celine, but I can bet you she wasn't even paid $1 million a year for that, or at least even close to the amount of money she was able to bring into this fashion house. And on top of that, she had to think twice before she took things off, like maternity leave. I guess that's yet another downside about working for someone else. I mean, she literally changed the face of fashion, and for boosting Celine's sales from 200 million euros to over 700 million euros a year. That's a pretty bad deal if you ask me. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that subject. With regards to the Olsen twins, after the sisters transitioned to the fashion industry from entertainment, they really disappeared off the face of the earth. It's not impossible to find bits and pieces about the girls post-college, but they really do try to keep to themselves. It's almost as if the girls are behind a smoke-filled room where you can only make out blurry figures. And that's not just a metaphor. Mary-Kate has long been known as a heavy smoker. And I think, all smokers are secretly introverts. I mean, they have the best excuse when they want to get away from a crowd of people because they can just say that they need to take a smoke break, when really that is code for taking a people break. One thing I haven't discussed in this episode is Ashley's Lyme disease. Not really sure where it fits into the story I wanted to tell, but for those who don't know, Lyme disease is transferred from a bug bite. But really, it's the bacteria in the bug bite that causes all of the issues. Issues can range from brain fog to memory loss, vision loss, and body aches. The whole nine. And unfortunately, there isn't a cure. A person may look completely normal, but on the inside, they're really hurting. Yolanda from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, I know this is weird to say, popularized the disease. It's a weird reminder that your health is truly the greatest luxury.